Let me tell you, when we claim territory in a church, as though we know it all, as though we're the boss of the church, as though we're the ones who know everything that is best for everyone else, that is called selfishness. Now, in the book of Philippians, chapter 4, verse 2, Paul mentions two women. I would hate to have my name in the Bible because I was a troublemaker, but these two particular women were. The Bible says, I urge, as Paul wrote them, I urge Euodia and Syntyche to live in harmony in the Lord. Apparently, these two women were at each other, so much so that it was dividing the congregation. Now, this is a hilarious verse. You're looking at, wait, hilarious? That doesn't look funny at all. It's hilarious if you look at the meaning of the names of the two women. For an example, do you know what the word Euodia means? Sweet fragrance. And do you know what Syntyche means? Blessing. Sweet blessing. Believe me, these two women were not a blessing. These two women were not a fragrance. As a matter of fact, one of them was stinking up the church and the other one was making the church rotten. It is a terrible situation. So Paul was writing to them and he said, live together in peace. And then notice verse 3, as he tells us how we, first of all, have a selfish attitude that can destroy our unity. He said, do nothing with selfishness. Now, how do you destroy a church? By being selfish. I tried to figure out an illustration without stepping on toes. And at Baptist church, that's hard to do. And so I decided, now how can I use an illustration? And I decided the parking lot. And if it's not the parking lot, it's the auditorium where you sit. Let's take the auditorium. And I'll use an illustration of a friend of mine from years gone back. A friend of mine was minister of music at church I pastored at one time. And he told me a story about something that happened whenever he was in view of a call or he had just accepted the call to a congregation, and it was his very first Sunday there. Well, before the service started, he was out rehearsing with the musicians, and his wife, where do I sit? So she just chose a seat near the front and sat down. And so John was up on the platform, and nobody knew Brenda, his wife. And so after a while, the pastor got up and he introduced John and said, he is here today. This is his first Sunday with us, and we are so delighted that he is here. And Brenda is here as well. Brenda, would you stand? And she stood up. And of course, everybody clapped, but one woman. So let me give you a little backstory. While John was rehearsing the musicians before the service started, Brenda walks out and she sits down in the seat, and the place was empty. Well, about 15 minutes before the service started, this lady walks up and stands at the end of the aisle and just stares at Brenda. Who knows? It seemed like 10 minutes. It could have been 30 seconds. And then she said, excuse me, but you're sitting in my seat. And Brenda looked all over the auditorium, totally empty at that point. And Brenda apologized, said, I'm sorry. And so she got up and moved somewhere else. There was one person in that congregation who didn't clap to welcome John and Brenda that day. And it was the woman who was totally embarrassed when she realized that she was sitting that the person that she ran out of her seat was the wife of her brand new minister of music. Let me tell you, when we claim territory in a church, as though we know it all, as though we're the boss of the church, as though we're the ones who know everything that is best for everyone else, that is called selfishness. And the very thing that Paul warns us about is do nothing with selfishness. And I believe that selfishness is the essence of sin itself. If you go back and think about all the sin that we commit as humans, you can all boil it down to, it's going to be my will and my way, selfishness. You go all the way back to the Garden of Eden, that's exactly what you find. You know what Eve did, right? She went up and she saw this tree that God said, every tree you can have the fruit, but not this one. And so she goes up and there's this serpent up there and there's this conversation and she submits and takes one of the fruit and takes a bite. And boy, her eyes were open. She said, boy, that's Bill's paraphrase, okay? And so she goes to Adam, tells him the story, hands him some of the fruit. He takes a bite and suddenly his eyes are opened and they realize we don't have any clothes on. And so they knit together some clothes and God comes and says, Adam, where are you? And God cornered Adam. And he asked Adam, what have you done? God knew what he did. And Adam realized he was caught. And you know what the Bible says he did. It's that woman that you gave me, he blamed God. So Eve said, well, it's that serpent that's over there. He's the one who tempted me and gave me this fruit. And the serpent looked around and there was no one left to blame, so he didn't have a leg to stand on. And so as a result, that selfishness started right there in the Garden of Eden. And it has come down through generation after generation after generation. And folks, if we're not careful, selfishness and pride can literally destroy a congregation.